Say, ladies and gentlemen, but mostly parishioners, unlike perhaps last night when we had a few interlopers. I'm sure pretty much everybody here is interested in what goes on in Trinity. And tonight is the opportunity for our deputies Hustings, so you're all very welcome. Obviously, we've got two candidates. I'm sure they don't need any introduction, but Hugh Raymond and David Richardson. And they're here to deliver a little speech and tell you what they've got to offer. The usual house rules: if you've got any mobile phones, could I ask that they were now put on to silent? And the fire exits are the lobby where you came in and this door over here. And the toilets are at the back. I don't think you need to hear too much else from me. We have got a timekeeper, Peter Williams, but this is a very friendly affair, being a Trinity do. So we will keep roughly to a set of agreement on timings that we've agreed with the clients, the two candidates. And other than that, it's Marcus of Queensberry rules this evening. And I'll invite David to speak first, because he won the toss of the coin. So over to you, David.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Monsieur le Connétable. It's a privilege to stand as deputy for Trinity. 30 years ago, I stood down from contesting Trinity against Roy Cabot, who then became your deputy. And I remember him distinctly saying, "Don't worry, you have plenty of years ahead of you. Just think it over." Well, Trinity, I'm back. I've come back to haunt you! And anyway, it's lovely to be back. And over the years, Trinity has changed. It has become a bustling village. It has also become a conduit for vehicles traveling from east to west. So one of the things that I did, I was knocking on practically every door I could come across, was obviously the highest priority is traffic calming, I think, in Trinity. And I conferred with your constable, and it seems that after extensive investigations, he's going to be putting in place all the necessary plans to have road calming. But certainly I think there should be a 20-mile-an-hour limit in Route d'Ebenezer, Route de Trinity, and probably the Rue Picot. I'm sure the constable will welcome any further suggestions. I suggest also the parish should have an additional pass from Le Clos, going down to Bully Bay, down to the top of the woods there, so the children can go down there. That's just an idea that can carry on from down here. It's just an idea I had, and a lot of other people seem to think. Also, during my travels from door to door, I realized that we need to encourage such organizations as the Trinity Community Care Scheme, started by Deputy Anne Bragg, which endeavors to reach out to elderly, handicapped, and ill people in the parish. Now, let me know that you know a little bit about myself. I was trained as a biologist. I worked for many years as a research scientist in Africa. I later trained as a teacher. I even was a medical student in Paris. I returned later to Jersey and eventually qualified as a chartered accountant, or chartered certified accountant. And I proudly ended my career as a money laundering reporting officer for a third world country, the Bank of India, or developing country, and thoroughly enjoyed my time with them. Over the years, I've volunteered for some very important posts. I was on the committee for Mind for many years. I recently was treasurer for the Jersey Asthmatic Respiratory Society. I volunteered for your own youth club many years ago when it opened. Last year, I was a support teacher in maths for the JCG as a voluntary post. But my only real claim to fame is the fact I started with something very close to my heart, the Optimum Population Trust, that later became Population Matters of the UK and has its patrons Sir David Attenborough and Jane Goodall. We all know Trinity is a lovely parish, and we must endeavour to keep the rural settings plain and beautiful. We must encourage the farmers to keep it green. I was a population scientist a long time before I became an accountant. Therefore, I believe population policy should have been put in place in this island a long time ago, and it's about time we did it. You will find that I address other matters in my manifesto. So I will leave you, give us some challenging questions, and thank you for listening.
Thank you. I've stood up here on many occasions, but not in this particular position. But I welcome everybody here and Conatad for chairing the meeting this evening. I'm not going to go into the background. I look around the room and most people know me or know of me. What I've done and what I haven't done is very much written on the manifesto that I've sent round. But one of the things that I wanted to get across straight away is that from the hustings I've seen on videos and from the hustings I've been to, I've never come across so much negativity. And I remember, because one of the things that I have never put down on my manifesto, only because I did it for 2 years, but my original education was that I was a teacher for 2 years. I never thought that I would end up with another teacher and a mother-in-law as a headmistress. So it's caught up with me after all these years. But I taught history for 2 years before I moved into finance. And the last lesson that I did before on teaching practice was that the lecturer came along and he said, "That was a very good lesson, Hugh, but just remember one thing about audiences, whether they're children or people like yourself, you always start with a positive and you end on a positive." And from what I'm seeing at the moment, there is so much negativity in these hustings. First and foremost, the positive side of Trinity. What a great place to live. We've got our walks, we've got the two harbours, and to some degree it is safe. I do take what David said, and I know that there's a lot of work going on in the background with regards to the road traffic and everything else. But this parish is a great place to live. So let's start on that. I'm sure with the questions that we're going to get over the next hour, hour and a half, we'll find out exactly how we think and what we want to do about it. But the main thing is that if you look at, again, the faces around the room, we love living here. Or shall I take the previous constable's statement? If you don't like it, there's a boat in the morning. But those days are gone because, unfortunately, you know, we live here. But if... Thank you, Clive. But it's so important that, remember, if you think we chose Trinity, we like living here, and that's the positive. I'm sure out of the questions later on there's going to be some sort of negativity, and there will be some questions and some answers that I don't know whether half the audience agree or not. But the one thing you're going to get out of me is the honesty of how I feel about answering questions and the honesty of how I feel about the present situation that we find here in Jersey. I will end up my surmise later on with the other positivity, but I won't do that until I get to the end. But I think that most of us are here tonight is to find out exactly what we think, what we do, and how we deal with it. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much indeed for listening.
Right, so we'll now move on to questions, and just to mention that the evening is being videoed so that it can be replayed on YouTube if you want to email it to your friends and family later on, or other people to listen. So what we'll need to do is to pass around the other microphone. So if you just give your name and wait for the microphone to arrive and then to give your question. And really, like last night, if we could have questions rather than speeches. So I think, in fairness, as David went first with the address, we'll ask Hugh to start when we've had the first question. So I'll throw the floor open to questions, wherever John is with the microphone. Is a gentleman here, John?
Thank you very much. Name's Steve Taylor. This is addressed to both candidates, but it's reflecting on your brochure, your manifesto, which talks about sports being good for social life, social side of life. Culture is also alongside sport. And as culture is recognised, theatre, for example, is recognised as being a great way of building teams, it's a great way of meeting people, it's a great way of keeping people active. So my question to you initially is, if you're elected into the States, what would you do to promote culture, theatre and the arts within Jersey? Thank you.
Thank you very much for the question. And again, which is now not down on my manifesto, Before we came back from England to reside in Trinity, I was chairman of a national theatre in the UK. We went through a stage where we nearly we had to close. And it was a county council that was deciding, because it was a county council-owned theatre. The whole point of sport, leisure, and rec, I think, tends to get confused with those three different departments. I'm very keen on sport, as you know, my background and everything else with regards to sport. I'm also very keen on culture. The trouble was, you didn't get the support overall from the county council, and I've just recently received a letter from from the Arts Centre and from the Opera House, where they're concerned about their funding for next year. You can't provide the facilities to live in a place unless you have the other facilities. And it makes it even more damning is that because of the work that I've done in the magistrates' court and done in the juvenile court, I get so sick to death of that phrase that keeps coming out, there's nothing to do in this island. And I am now getting to the stage that almost to the point that you want to go out and scream about it, because we've got to keep culture going. The children must realise what culture's about, they must realise what sport's about. And I would support any culture activities or any sport activities, and you've got my total heart behind that, without any doubt at all.
Thank you, Steve. It's a good question, one because I wasn't expecting it. I think we try to do a lot for culture in this island, and I think we can still do a lot more. But one idea I have had, and very consistently have, is we have a very beautiful orchestra, which you go and see twice a year. And it is fantastic. I don't know if you went to the last one, the Russian concerts, what it was called. It was brilliant. It was so professional, it could have been in the middle of London. Now, I've always said, and I agree with Sir Philip Balash, I think there's a tremendous amount of talent in this island. And if we could have a department of music at a university level, coordinate as one additional, we could then bring children in from schools who learn music and go upwards. And tangentially, we also have the other side. I used to have a child who didn't want to have any classical music. We have the rock band, a very good rock band school in the island, and I think that should be encouraged. I think as much music as we can encourage children, and to read music. And one of the things I didn't, and I'm culturally in the abyss here, I didn't learn to read music. Therefore, I'm at a great disadvantage. I'm the choir, so I have to go like this when I listen to my neighbour. So I think children can learn music today much more easily than we could ever learn. The instruments out there, and I've seen in the JCG, the brilliant things you can do on these iPads today will go. So I think one side of culture is that. The other side of culture we have in Jersey is we have a book festival, which we should encourage, a lot of writing. We have the pantomimes and the school in the back. Do you remember that play we just seen down at Le Roquier? Brilliant, brilliant plays. More plays than possible at school. So children go out and learn to perform in front of everyone. It should be compulsory for everybody to get out there. I never had a chance of standing on stage. I wish I had done. And I think every child should get on stage and learn about culture in that respect. So that maybe will answer some of your questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So, our next question. The next question. You to go first.
I'm to go first.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Mike Stenterford. With the predicted higher population and a desperate need for new housing for young first-time buyers, clearly on the current political agenda, how would the candidates respond to the real possibility that our country parishes might well soon have to sacrifice agricultural fields and areas of green zone?
Thank you. I've been standing on this issue of population since 1990 when I first came back, and I lost my job as a result of doing that. And I had to retrain as an accountant as a result. But I do think that we have got to tackle population number one. There are And there are many ways it's going to be done. I'm not going to go into that. But as for housing, there are many houses, many buildings that have gone vacant in St Helier as a result of the waterfront move. And I think the next great building frenzy could quite well be coming in St Helier. And that may be where we will have to start. I'm hoping we don't have to sacrifice fields. That's why I'm standing. I'm trying to stop that wherever possible. And we have 1,000 new builds on the row. I don't know how many are going to be in Trinity, but I hope they're not going to be here, because Trinity, we have a beautiful parish. And that is why I'm standing. I'm saying, I put on my website a vanilla white constitutional party called the Alternative Party. Should there be an appetite for it after the election? So I can go in and ask you to join, and that is the primary aim, to communicate and get people who really do want to stop that. We must find ways of filling brownfield sites, try and get houses that are vacant, buy them up and convert them and put 4 or 5 flats in those. Any other way than go down the greenfield site. That's my response. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. I think it's the statement that, or the question that everybody faces. It's ironic, the first 2 questions. Having left teaching, I joined a very big finance company that started doing first-time purchases. And one of the biggest problems we had in the UK was that we were looking at village sites, and we're going back to the 80s when we were looking at village sites that we didn't want to build on green land. It came out over the years with Langs and Wimpy's and these sort of companies that we actually did get together and worked with the local authorities to be able to do it. I think that here we have to look at the local authorities. I'm just slightly concerned, i.e. the parishes, but I'm just slightly concerned with the amount of flat development going on in St Helier. That does worry me a little. I don't think, as far as I'm aware, that there's any planning applications for properties in Trinity at the present time. But if there was an opportunity, which we were fortunate with regards to Grand Clos, to build those houses for our first-time purchasers there, then if there is an opportunity, then we must look to make sure that we do look after our younger people coming through and that they can buy affordable housing. But I'm very much against just building it anywhere. I think the interesting comments, and I read the transcript from the St Peter's situation at Beaumont, there was some mistakes made there, and I think the existing constable is trying to change it. It was probably over-densified at some stage, but I would support anything where we can work together to make sure that we can build affordable housing for our youngsters without harming greenfield sites. Thank you.
And next questioner, please. John, this gentleman there.
Good evening. How would you tackle the approach to education? As it currently stands, we have constant assessments in primary and secondary schools and increased mental health issues in 1 out of 10 children.
Thank you.
Thank you. There's a couple of people laughing. I'm at the present stage, madam, at this moment, of we've had recently, I've had to take a couple of younger children to court with regards to mental health problems. And what staggered me in this island, and it has staggered me, we're now getting into the negative side, was that it seems to me we have to criminalize children or grown-ups to get them the help they need in mental health. I've just read a report this week where, 4 in every 10 children at the moment could be suffering from mental health situations. But we have to see, it seems to me that we don't have the backup to be able to follow it through. And I'll give you one example. One of the charities has offered to do a report on one of the children that we took to the juvenile court because there wasn't the facility to do the research on those children. The other thing that happens is that, which I totally don't understand, is that we then send them away back to the UK to get help. But at 18, they have to come back again. And there is no support structure when they come back, unless they've gone through the court. I am very concerned about it, and I'm also, I mean, as I said, I'm surrounded by educationalists, albeit retired, but the education system is breaking down, and it does need desperately to be looked at. And I think that with Charlie Parker in there, and from what I'm hearing with regards to what's going on in the education department at the present time, I think there might be some positive ways out. Personally, I don't see how they're going to do it without money, and personally, I don't see it unless they employ people to look after them. But it really is an area that does need looking at. Our education of our children, fundamentally, is the most important factor that we should be looking at.
I used to be in education, and I also worked in mines, so I know a little bit about what you're talking about here. Anxiety in children is a horrible thing, and it's very difficult to deal with, especially if the parents don't understand what's going on. I think it's something that should be, there should be a service for it. I know that there was a service for children who have difficulty in learning difficulties, and they put aside and go down that line. I worked on a program where, by somebody who used to lecture in the evenings, who used to work in that facility, and he was very gifted. And that is the line I would go. I think if the teachers can pick up a child that's having mental problems, and mental problems vary from depression all the way to behavioral problems, and there is a wide spectrum, and when you're talking about mental health, you've got to be very careful in which area you're talking about. That will depend on which way you will send that person. But I would be all for, if there is that dysfunction in our society for children with mental problems, mental health problems, then that should be provided for. Certainly, the current trend is, and the current appetite we have, as you know, everybody's talking about mental health. It's very, very big in the press, and it's very big and it's very real, because 1 in 4 of us have mental health problems in our life. So if it's tackled earlier on in life, much better. And I was one who, when I came back from Africa in the bush, and after being alone for 4 or 6 years, I had mental problems, but they were dealt with. And I'm a perfectly normal human being as a result. So you can recover from it. So if you get somebody early enough in the back and say that it's perfectly normal, you get over it, you grow out of it, all the better. Thank you.
And the next question, please. John, there's a lady there in the red jacket. Thank you. That's you to go first.
Harmstenteford. I would like to ask you, when you look around here, I feel there's a lack of younger faces. Would that be a subject for the education department as well, to teach more politics in schools or bring children to have more interest in that?
Very good question indeed. Yes, I think there very much is a demand for getting politicians into schools. And I certainly, when I was teaching the JCG or wherever, they were requesting, even thinking about bringing politicians into the schools. You know that we take children regularly down to the States Chamber and get them to have an interface and sit in the seats and produce debates. Certainly, debate is a great form. But politics is a really interesting, quite a difficult subject to get children interested in. It's not, it's the 18-year-olds that are the difficult children. They're difficult people to get into. And that is going to be always there. And until they get involved in life in general, I don't think they're going to come to these sort of events. It's a very different sort of politics. We're dealing with politics now that often they don't vote. That is a problem too. So how do you go out? I haven't actually, when I've been going out canvassing, met that many young. The ones I have met, I have tried to explain the views, and they tend to snigger. It is quite difficult to get. I think one shouldn't get too excited by the fact they're not necessarily interested in their 18 to 25-year-olds. Everyone gets into politics as they grow older. If there's suddenly a particular empathy on a particular point in discussion in politics be there a flare-up in our society, then they become naturally interested. Whether one can artificially create that, like a riot, like I used to be a French student at a university there, and every year they used to have a week off, as far as I could see, to go for riots. That's how they get interested in politics. Or do you want to go down the French line? I wouldn't. I think they're completely mad. Every year they have the problem. So I think take it simply. If we can get them interested in a constructive way, that is the best way forward. Yes, I agree that we can do probably more. We can always do more. Thank you.
I think it's best not to talk to my two children, who are both in the room, actually. So, they've, I think, probably seen enough of politics with me floating about from the UK to here. But it is a very important question. But the interesting thing about it is, having spoken to them, and especially with some of the, and knowing quite a few of the people at Grand Clos, the interesting thing is they're concerned about their mortgage, the family. Politics does tend to be down the line a bit. And again, I think that you tend to get involved in politics as you get older. They've got more other things to worry about. And I think the other thing is, and speaking to my own son, his argument is that, you know, I'm concerned about my next move up the ladder. I'm concerned about what I'm going to do next. And politics doesn't come into it, because as long as they can afford to pay what they've got and what they're doing, they don't heavily get involved. And I think the other thing over here, which does make a big difference, and I think, and I don't want to get into the debate because I'm not sure where we are with it, but if you take politics in the UK, you are attacking a system, i.e. Labour, Liberal or Tory. The problem here is that you're taking on 49 individuals with 49 different thoughts about politics, and I think that they've completely lost the train of thought in where they're going. I think educated children these days and people that go through school want to be able to see where they're going and what's being offered. I think from the political viewpoint today in Jersey, at the present time, is not clear, because, as I said, 49 manifestos, 49 different thoughts on education, and it really has to be clarified. And I think going forward, we've got to look at ways of getting more of our children involved in politics. But at the moment, they're more concerned about paying their mortgage and making sure they've got enough money in the kitty. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Okay, the next question, there's a hand up at the back. John?
Who's first? David Lacane. What one specific step would you take to improve the standing and reputation of the states?
I think it's you with that curveball first, Hugh.
How to improve the states? I really am lost here. I'm just trying to think desperately, having sat upstairs in watching them, and what I don't quite understand is that you have all these people in the States, but in effect say very little. And I find that very difficult. I personally think there's too many in the States. I think with 49 people representing a population of 100,000, I just think the Borough Council doesn't do that in a county, for goodness sake. It doesn't do it in a parish council. And here we have 49 people. And the other thing is that I don't think the general public actually know senator, deputy, constable. They're effectively, well, they're all paid the same. So the one change I would make, how we do it, I don't know, because you're going to get then down to, do the deputies go, do the senators go? But we have to reduce the numbers in the states. I think that the negotiations, the discussions that go on within the states are far better served by a less number of people than there is at the present time. So my one point, and I have to say it is a very, very good question, my one point would be, we've got to reduce the numbers in the states. How we do it, I don't know, but I will say one thing. I've got a feeling that this next term, over the next 4 years, there will be a change of the number of people in the States. Thank you.
I don't think there's one answer for that, because there's so much that needs to be done to improve what goes on in the States. Certainly, one of the most blatant things is if you go to it's always been the case, if you go to the senatorial, you've got 17 candidates there with 17 different manifestos, and it is quite obvious. People ask me in the street, who shall I vote for, what do they do, etc., and they can probably choose 4, and the rest are guessing. So that is absolutely certain. Now, I have got on the web a constitution for a party called the Alternative Party to construct for constructive debate with the Reform Party. So that's one thing we can do. We can go down the party line, okay? The Conservative Party, Labour Party, whatever it is. That would make it simpler. So when people stand up, you have a manifesto. That's one thing you can do. The second thing is, obviously, as we know, there are too many in the States. That's the most obvious thing. And as the Clothier report said, there should probably only be one sort of politician in there, and it's probably the deputies. Whether this is true or not, I definitely think the constables should have a say. I think they should have a different house, and they should maybe one person come and represent their view, and that would really, need everybody in there at once. So maybe then you've got the deputies and the senators. And then the senator could be simplified up by only allowing those ones to stand that have actually been deputies. And maybe we'll reduce numbers that way. But definitely, yes, reducing numbers and a constitution. So in other words, certain party forms. So in other words, we're moving away slightly from consensual politics towards a party line. Thank you.
Good evening, Mo Lavar, Chairman of the Battle Flowers Association. I'd just like to ask the candidates, after listening to the news tonight, the 2 major events have been pulled in this island, which are tourism orientated. Would you, as a member, push the state to invest more money in tourism-held events in this island?
Yes, I think we are a tourist island. I think that's that's our future sideline after finance. But I do think we've got to quell the population, because if nobody's going to come here, if they're crowded with cars and we've got too much housing, that's evident. So what I would do for tourism is quite well. We've got a person in here who helped the heritage formed, and that's been a brilliant start. We can actually we can go to all these heritage sites, and they're being very well kept. So I would go down that line. We've got blue badges, which are really important. I think we're going to organise that so many more people will be able to be shown around. But the more heritage we can give, the better. And it's a very easy one we can give, because we're surrounded by heritage in this island. So we need to support heritage in every way we can. Films of the heritage, of what went on in Jersey. We have a fascinating history with its fisheries. I think it could be, that would be a lovely start. We could have a really good film on the history of Jersey. That would be a great thing. And I think from the tourism point of view, we've got to up our stance on Airbnbs, which is the way we're going. Make sure that they're high quality. I run an Airbnb, and people come in and they're expecting hotel quality. That is going to increase the number of beds and number of people who can come in. And I think that's exciting, because when they come in and they can go out where they want to feel. So the more Airbnbs we do to replace the hotels, the better. That will help tourism. So I think an animated help from the tourism to help Airbnbs organize themselves would be very helpful in keeping tourists come in. Thank you.
Don't get me started on Airbnbs. There's huge discussions going on behind the scenes at the moment, and all I will say is that the issue with Airbnbs, it's like Uber. Let's get one thing absolutely straight. There's no jurisdiction on Airbnbs, but there's jurisdiction on bed and breakfasts and everything else. I'm slightly concerned to hear what David has said, because that's going to affect both the hotel and the B&B industry, or the bed and breakfast hotels. I'm just rather concerned about those sort of statements, I have to say. But going back to your question, Mo, sports tourism and arts tourism, I'm slightly concerned, because I got the phone call this morning, because What I didn't realise, there's been a lot of people booked flights and everything else. Now, the organisers of the big gig in the park have said that their tickets the money will be returned, but there's some concern that people that have booked flights and everything else, and especially have booked flights from Guernsey, our sister island, about coming over. There's some question as to exactly what's going on. I've always been a great believer in the big gig in the park and all the events that go on. And you know full well, with regards to the amount of sports tourism going on, I think to some degree we tend to take it too long. I'm quite in favour of Lyndon doing this 5-year plan with regards to the triathlon. I would have preferred to have done it over 3 years just to see what the consequences are after 3 years. And it's exactly the same with some of the events that go on in the park. And likewise, I mean, we have our own festival here, do we not, called Weekender every year, or Jersey Live. And that is beginning to get a little bit bigger. And some of our parishes aren't big enough to be able to take it. But what I'm getting at, what I'm saying, though, is that we have to support these people coming in. And don't get me wrong, here we go again. It has to be either sponsored or has to be supported by the state's government. Thank you.
And the next question. Hand up. Mr. Hino.
Good evening, Des Hino from Trinity. I'd like to ask the candidates what their opinions are to the so-called experts we keep employing from the UK. We certainly don't want a consultant doing a traffic calming in Trinity. We don't want to end up like St Mary's.
I shall report back to Mary's. Okay, thank you. I listened to St John's. I don't know if anybody else did listen to Hustings. I think the questions that the deputies at the Hustings have been very clever and very good. And one St John's was particularly good because that traffic calming thing came up. And somebody came up with a brilliant answer. He just said, we just put up cameras, you know, and that would be a start. You have the road signs and you have the cameras which will pick up the people speeding. That might be a very valid start for traffic calming measures, if that's one of the things you're at. And that's actually very cheap to do, I think. Whether the constables will be in favour of that is another answer, but certainly that was quite widely accepted there. I don't believe in the road humps, you know, the things which, as St Mary's has, and I think most people think that's the wrong idea, although I do like the one at St Martin's. I think that's a brilliant traffic calming mechanism. But road cameras would be helpful. The person's nodding his head. I'm not quite sure what I'm saying. It's incorrect. But I do think that we need traffic calming, obviously, and it's open discussion, and I'm sure the constable is aware of what's going on. But the response from people in St John's when they talked about cameras was positive, and it is a very accurate way of catching somebody. And once you're caught, and you know there's road cameras, they'll be hidden, you can convict, and people will drive slowly. Thank you.
I'm just slightly confused. The question was what?
Why are we importing so many UK consultants?
Oh, sorry, I thought it was, you said something about St Mary's. Yeah, you're quite right now.
Sorry, you got much more round of applause than us two did, so perhaps you better come up here, Des. I think you're doing very well, I must admit. I got lost on the answer. That's why I was... consultants, did you see the JEP tonight?
Yes.
What was it? There's 37 people that were employed last year, more so than the year before, at 100,000 plus. And if you look at it, they only showed 2017-16, but if you go back, it's been happening all the time. And at the moment, there's 6,754 civil servants at the moment. So we do it because of the number of people that enter sports and deal with culture. It's quite funny, because you get civil servants at 6,754. If you take a partner, that's 13. And then if you take children, there's 20,000 civil servants. But going back to the question, really, which is really what I wanted to get back to, I think I think there's ability in this island of people that can come up with the answers. And I just find it difficult when you talk to people. There's quite a few people retiring back to the island. We've got to start using these people that are very, very well educated and knowledgeable about certain things, and we don't seem to get them in. What we tend to do is to import them in on very large salaries when there's people here that can do the job ourselves.
Thank you. And the next question, please.
Someone down the front could do with the exercise.
One at the back. Right at the back. Alan.
Alan LeMaitre. We've had a couple of questions already about education, sports and culture, about tourism. It's always, the easier questions are always, would you support this and that? And of course, we all would like to support many of these things. But as we know, the reality is our government likes to spend. And there is a certain amount in the bank that we have to spend. So a difficult question for you both, but what is the one area of cuts that you would like to see, or where you could rein in some of the government expenditure?
Not employ the consultants. I just think we've got to look at where we're spending our money and why we need to spend the money. It's a very valid question, because nothing's come on about the hospital, but people that we employ in the hospital are very talented people, and we require them in there. So you take the hospital to one side, but I still go back to this idea that when you meet people, and there's people in this room that have been in very, very senior positions and are retired, we should be using these people, and we don't seem to use them. Whether they're shy about coming forward or whether they've done far too much, I don't know. But I do find it difficult to find where you cut. And the other thing is that I'm privileged in some of the committees and boards I sit on. I mean, I sit on one particular board. There's 12 of us. I'm the only volunteer on that board, and the other 11 people around the table are all over 100,000. And there's only one local person in there, and that's not me. And that board plays a huge, important part to the island. And that's where I do find that very difficult, because I am sure there are people in this island that could do some of the jobs that they're doing. Privileged to sit there, privileged to know, but I'm not sure we're spending the money in the right places. And they're very good people, but we've got them here. Thank you.
Good questions. If we had to make consultants, I apologise for the last response, obviously about consultants, I didn't answer that. I think that if I had to make cuts, I mean, there are many projects which we undertake that may be put aside. I mean, some of the granite products we put out on the roads sometimes seem a bit excessive. In town, we put granite everywhere, and that must be amazingly expensive. So if I was to cut back on some of the capital projects, I might cut back on, and that might save on tremendous amounts of sums. I don't know. But I would certainly look at that. Some of the capital projects in the airport we do know are excessive. Some of the capital projects we do put down for the hospital might well be excessive. So there will be cutbacks. And on capital projects, I would try and cut back and reduce there. And that would inevitably shed labour in those particular circumstances. I went down the road the other day and I saw 4 people doing what one person can do. And that's often the case when in the transport, on the roads, for instance. I think there's a lot of mismanagement. I hear about this a lot from people who come and work on my house. They say, I can't work for the state, so I go in there, I've got one job for a day, I get bored. So there's inactivity within the states. So there must be a natural shed along there. There must be, at the moment we're doing cutbacks at the top. That's inevitable, that's got to happen. But I think after, in the long run, we'll have to also cut back right the way down. Thank you.
So, next questioner, John, there's a gentleman here in the middle. Thank you.
Hello, evening. My name is Oliver Grummet. I'd just like to ask the candidates, given the number of cars and the huge amount of traffic we seem to have on the island these days, what steps can be taken to reduce our reliance on the car, and should the bus service, in particular in Trinity, be improved?
I've heard a lot about the bus service in Trinity and complaints about it because it has to go to the zoo and then it comes back and it's very slow. Obviously, we could try and improve the bus service in Trinity. That's without a shadow of doubt. As a number of cars, we all travel in cars. I think my greatest bugbear is the size of car, not only just the number, the size. So I think one of the things I would do, I think I would tax the size of car. I think we are going to go down the electric line in the near future, so we will see a natural shedding of petrol cars. And therefore, electric cars are better when they're smaller anyway. But there's, for some reason, people want to have big SUVs. I couldn't drive one. I'd crash it within 5 minutes. But there's an enormous tendency to have those cars. So I would certainly tax those larger cars and get them off the road if I could. That would improve, at least start improving. And as again, it's down to population. We've got to control the population. And if we don't do that, we will have more cars. I can't see any alternative until we get to such a state we become like a city where we will have to then have parking outside towns and coaches coming in. But I haven't seen it yet. There's an appetite for that. People want to get in their car in the morning. They want to go to work. I do think the size of car is important. That will help. Thank you.
There's 127,000 registered motorised vehicles in the island, which you probably know, sir. There is, at any one time between 4 and 6 o'clock on the avenue, there's 35,000 cars going backwards and forwards. It is becoming a nightmare. It's going to become an even bigger nightmare if more and more cars are put onto the roads. I think we keep on talking about sharing and cars and this situation. I mean, our own road itself has become more and more used for the simple reason that people are taking the back cut to the independent schools to go to Montfort and across the back of us. And we've seen an increase. We did a vehicle check the other morning. What was it? 7:30 to 8:45. 900 cars gone through past the zoo. So that'll give you some idea of the amount of traffic. I'm not taxing cars higher because they're bigger. I think we've got to get people realizing that there is this shared situation. But the problem is you get people that drop their children off early because they're going to work, and then they pick them up earlier on. They can't get their husband to do it. But surely, at the end of the day, we've got to realize that enough is enough. With regards to the bus service, I'm smiling because I think Mrs. Pryke spent some time a couple of years ago trying to get more and more buses into the parish. And they kept on saying, well, we're not using it. And that was one of the problems. But we've got to make sure that people use it. In fact, I'm using it now for the first time ever, catching the bus from town back up. But it's irregular. It doesn't suit the period of time that you want to do it. I'm not that keen on putting prices up, but I think that that's the only way to do it. The bus service is subsidised. More people should be using the bus service, and there should be more interlinking between the schools and the buses as well. Thank you.
And the next question is the gentleman there.
Alan White. Given we cannot attract competition to rival Condor due to the limited access and size of vessels, is Jersey's port fit for purpose?
Is it? Yeah. If I told you the number of times I've sat with Lux and Condor, what I don't quite understand, and I've never quite understood, I got heavily involved with Condor because of the business of Jersey and Guernsey and the sport connections. And funnily enough, the other thing that came up, which was great, was that they brought culture into it as well, because we were talking about theatre groups and everybody going backwards and forwards. I've got this horrible feeling at the moment that obviously with Condor, as you know, is up for sale. The trustees of the company dealing with it will almost sell it. I don't think there's any doubt about it. I also looked at the transcripts when the discussions were going on with P&O, which was about 5-6 years ago, which we had an offer, but we didn't seem to agree with it. Now, Jersey has signed the agreement with Condor, but Guernsey hasn't, and I've never quite understood. So are they just waiting for us to make the mistake, and they're just going to go their own way at the end of the day? And it just slightly worries me as to what's going on behind the scenes. But going back to whether the port's fit for purpose, the port is fit for purpose. It has problems with high water, low water, as you know, and we can only get, especially the Liberation. But is the Liberation the right boat anyway? So we come back down. The port may be fit for purpose, providing we get the right boats fit for purpose to come into the ports. And I think that that's where the discussion should be being taken. And if Condor does, if the Liberation does go, there might be some more discussions going on. We're going to wait and see this year because there's extra boats being put on, but they still don't match the timetables that want to do it. Okay, we've got the Marathi coming up, and I think there's 500 people going over to the Marathi next week. But that's okay because Condor knows they've sold the boat. But we can't get a guarantee from them as to where we're going. Mr. Luxon, having been very much part of the government of Guernsey, I'm surprised he hasn't seen it still yet. But there's a lot more going on behind the scenes at the present time than I think that we know about, and it will be interesting to see what happens. Sorry. Thank you.
Very good question, and I've spent many hours discussing whether there could be any competition. I think if we're going to have, is it fit for purpose, probably the answer is maybe no. It is possible that there is another sort of boat that we should take as opposed to that. Do we all have to go on the Condor Express? Is it really the boat we require? I mean, how many of you have been on Brittany ferries from Roscoff to Plymouth? An excellent service, not quite as fast, albeit, but a very comfortable boat. And I'm just wondering whether a boat like that wouldn't be better. And I had an evening discussing that, and many people thought it might well be. You know, it comes from St. Malo, goes via Jersey, goes straight to the UK. It hasn't got to go by Guernsey. Various alternatives. And your question was it fit for purpose? I don't think it is. I think we should be thinking out of the box here and thinking maybe of a different type of service. That boat service will not go forever. It consumes the most amazing amount of fuel. It's the most un-environmentally friendly boat you can possibly come across. Okay, it's great going across there, but it makes people sick, I think, a lot of the time. I don't think it is the best boat. But we've got to think out of the box. I think there is a different sort of boat we can have. And that hasn't come to the fore yet. I hope that answers your question. Thank you.
And the next question? So it's you to go first.
Good evening. Frederick Fokelman. I'm a retired marine expert. In relation to Condor, many people don't realize that it's the state itself that's caused this situation. In the service agreement, there is a requirement for a fast service to and from the UK. Because, as one of the candidates has said, is the vessel suitable? Because it's a vessel which is intrinsically unsuitable for bad weather by design, Condor is forced to have this vessel in order to meet the service agreement. So what are the candidates proposing to do about the service agreement?
I'd say very quickly we'd have to look at the service agreement in length, but it's not something you can do overnight. I mean, these boats are incredibly expensive. And we'd have to first think out of the box and see what alternatives we have, and then go down that line. and then we'd have to go back to think about the service agreement. Hopefully, we could have a service agreement that includes 2 companies rather than just one. And that would be my first stop, because if you have just one, this is what would happen. We were given the end of a line boat, which they couldn't get rid of, you know, the big, big condor, right? So that's wrong. We've got one company. We must have 2 companies. Is there a way we can do this? And I think we have to go right back to basics. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Yeah, I have seen the service agreement, and that's what without going backwards with regards to past politicians, I can never understand why we signed the agreement in the first place. I think it was almost desperation stakes because they couldn't find anybody else to come into the route. And I think that that's what caused the problem. And I think that the number of times that I've been backwards and forwards from Poole and Weymouth and Portsmouth to Jersey, everybody I'm sure in this room and everybody that we deal with, sports bodies or whatever, if the boat, like the old British rail boat, we knew it sailed, we knew it went, we knew it took 10 hours, so we accepted it. The problem here is that we keep saying that this boat does it in 4.5 hours and it's okay. But as you rightly said, sir, the biggest problem with it, it's not fit for purpose with regards to the English Channel. And without treading on toes, whoever signed the service agreement, which you've probably seen as well, you wouldn't, the trouble is now, you wouldn't sign it because you know what's gone on, but it should never have been signed in the first place. And I think that without any doubt that we've got almost to go back to scratch, but we've got to pull Guernsey on side, and that is the essential situation. I don't think you can do it. There's not enough population to do it without both islands, albeit we'd like to have our own boat going backwards and forwards. But all we want is a boat that goes. We know it's going. Okay, it takes 10 hours. So what? We take it. But we've got to do something because we are going to suffer without any doubt at all. Thank you.
And another question? Is there anyone else who hasn't wants to ask a question?
Okay, thank you very much. How do you evaluate the reform plans that have been put into the public domain regarding the the civil service and the ministries, especially with regards to quality control?
I'm sorry. Could you summarize it into a short question? We didn't actually quite understand the drive there.
The new chief executive has put into the public domain some plans for changing the civil service, and I'm sure you have read about it, and I would like to know how you evaluate that, because now I think the states would still have the chance to influence them, and how the ministries are structured, because one of those plans was to put them together in a new mix-up, if I may say so. Okay. It's not the old structures that you are used to.
So the question is really, what do the candidates think about the new system?
How do you evaluate that? Would you support that? Would you do some other, would you make some other suggestions? That's a question of organization here. Good organization of the states and the civil service.
Okay, so I think it's really, what do we think of Charlie Parker's new system? I think if I to put it into a nutshell. Good luck.
I'm sure there's other people in the room, but I've had 2 meetings with Charlie Parker over the last 14 days, one of which was talking about the structure of certain departments. I think it's common knowledge that certain departments are being broken up as we speak, and certain departments and certain individual senior staff are being asked to reapply for their jobs, and without going too far down the line. The problem I've got, and I think the problem that we've all got, is we don't know what's happening. And what I do find, without upsetting too many people, I do find a little bizarre that the states, the existing states, agreed everything with him, with the general election coming up. And I just wonder how much power we've got if we go back. Because by the time we go back, who is ever elected, we're at the beginning of June, are these decisions already being made? And I'm just slightly concerned as to the power that we do have if we can change it, or even know what's changing. The only thing is that I will say, which I said at the beginning, and that is departments are being restructured, departments are being looked at, the number of people sitting in senior posts have been asked to reapply. Some people are on 45-day notice, or there's implications, and that is going on. But the thing that worries me, 1st of June, and we could be in the House June, July, and all these decisions are made. But from what I am hearing, there will be losses. So let's hope that that does mean that we're going to have at least a reduction in some of the costs that are coming to us with regards to some of these high salaries. Thank you.
I hope Mr. Parker does it, because we've had how many consultants before who tried to do the same thing? I can think about 10 in my lifetime that have tried to do that. What he's done is probably correct. Obviously, as we don't know what's going to happen, but I think by changing a department, you often have to do that to get rid of dead wood, as it say. You know, people sit in there, and it's well known that the states people, when they get in, their best way of raising their salaries is to take on somebody else and make a big army. So the way he's going to do it is obviously cut back and restructure everything. And I think that may be a breath of fresh air. Hopefully, the shedding of jobs will, and you'll outsource, will mean that will be people have to work harder for what they've got. We have got, without a shadow of doubt, a bloated civil service. We know we've got too many. So it's got to happen. And the way he's doing it, it's his style. And probably a style, hopefully, a style that will work this time. Because it hasn't worked in the past. I hope that answers some of the questions. Thank you. Thank you.
And another question? Yes, just Mike at the back.
Michael Hickey. My question is prompted by the fact that the two candidates have disclosed that they were ex-teachers. And forgive me for coming back to education, but not from the point of view of the students, but there is a real crisis in the recruiting of teachers. And I just wonder what the candidates would do. Presumably they'd be interested in the education department if they were elected, or when one of them was elected, and what would they do about recruiting teachers into the island? And just as a sub-question, you don't have to answer this one, but why did you leave the profession?
Thanks, Mike. Is it me? Yeah. Why I left the profession? I stood as a candidate for senator when I came back, I seem to remember, and my tutor rang up and said, "We don't want you." So I had to become an accountant, literally, overnight. So that was one reason why I didn't come. But he did say later on, "You would have made a very good teacher, by the way." So that's a nice thing to say, but that's after the event. But how would I do it? I think, I know that Jersey is actually very high up in the tables in terms of compared to the UK. So we actually have a better education system up to A-level at least, that's producing better quality results. It's not at Singapore level by any means. Yes, I'm very strong on maths, and I think that's one of the things where you've got to bring in people. How I would do it, and I do think there is a problem, and when you're dealing with population, you're doing a problem. I have a contract where I probably offer that person housing when he comes, so they don't have that worry. I'm talking about particular sorts of teachers. I'm talking about high-quality maths teachers you need in every school, high-quality physics teachers. I'm a scientist, and I think those are probably the subjects of the future. So you're going to, and you've got IT teachers, we've got those. So how I would do it in those particular cases, if you're suffering from not having those, I would offer them special deals. And you would, at the end, offer them a bonus to leave, rather than buy a house, for instance. That hasn't been tried, but that's what I had when I was abroad. I was given accommodation. I was also given a bonus to leave. So there is that possibility.
I left teaching because I sat in the senior mistress's chair inside the staff room. And if you remember, in the old days, if you sat there, you were always told, hang on a minute, that chair's only for her. No, seriously. I'd taken economics, and I'd studied economics, and I had a better offer via round table because somebody couldn't believe that in those days it was £650 and £75 for a degree. So you earned £725. Somebody with less qualifications was sitting in a building society manager's office earning £1,200, a company car, and a 4% mortgage. And he enticed me to come out, and I joined the building society movement. It was as simple as that, Mike. Your other point is very valid, but I'm just wondering whether we're encouraging enough of our children to come back. I mean, I keep hearing there's quite a few teachers this side of the room, so I've been careful, not only down the front, but there's they're ducking their heads now. But all the secondary schools at the present time are struggling. You know that, I know that. The junior schools aren't too bad, but we still have a problem in the junior schools because the vast majority of junior schools are female orientated, and that's not been derogatory about ladies, but you do need a quantity of men in junior schools as well. The children have to be effective to get on with teachers. I think there has to be a lot more encouragement about bringing people back. I think when teachers go off and do their fourth year, when they come back after qualifications, we've got to look to get them back into education. And albeit, we may well have to offer incentives. The other thing is that there is a sort of culture here that, I don't know, teaching's not one of those professions that's highlighted enough to say you can do very well in teaching and you ought to think about coming back to the island. Thank you.
Peter Funk. Yep. Good evening, Peter Funk. First of all, I think we all commend you both for standing for office. It's a brave thing to do. Thank you. My question revolves around finance. You have both been speaking about our budget deficit and what we do about it, and savings and so forth. The government, our states, has run a budget deficit since the introduction of 010, and it's going to continue to do so. We have in front of us a project for the hospital, which at present is going to, at present projections, is going to cost £466 million, to be financed by a doubling of our debt and a borrowing from our Strategic Reserve Fund. Can you tell us what your view is on the hospital, the project, and whether or not, in view of the fact that we are having an election and there will be a new States Assembly, whether or not you would be in favor of reviewing the decision, not the decision to build a new hospital, but some of the details behind it, like its cost and where it should be built. Thank you.
Thank you. Right. I think it's you to go first.
Thank you, Peter. I'm sure both of us thought it was going to come up. It was quite interesting last night with Sir Nigel Broomfield asked a similar question. And it was interesting, the vote at the end. I've gone from one side to the other, and as you know, we have quite a few doctors in the parish. We have quite a few consultants in the parish as well. But do doctors know how to build hospitals, and do administrators know how to deal with doctors? You could go round and round. I'm coming to the conclusion, having spoken and been given quite a bit of detail with regards to the hospital has to be built. What worried me was the statement coming from the States a couple of weeks ago, which said they're going back to review. Well, is that for us to review to see where it goes, or is it us to review to see the costs? I am actually coming down to saying, is it being built in the right place? I've got now statistics with regards to, as it sits at the moment, you could have the hospital in 6 different sites across the island. Is that good? You're also trying to build a hospital in, and the question came up earlier on, with so many cars coming in and out of Gloucester Street and the road. Is that the right place to build it? You've also got the medical profession saying, you know, it's been going on, and all they'd like to be able to say to their staff, for goodness sake, make a decision, let's get on with it. But I do think that, from my own perspective, I think we should go back. We should look at what the costs are, and we should look, dare I say it probably a different site than where it is being built at the present time. Although I'm sure not everybody is going to agree with that in this room because of the context of the people that are involved in the hospital. But I just think that it really does have to be looked at in a much more wider detail than it has been in the past. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter, for your excellent letter in the Evening Post. Fantastic, well done. I hope everybody read it. And some of the letters in the Evening Post are good, but his was especially good. But he did an enormous amount of research on it. I would say, I was listening very, very carefully to the debate yesterday, and it was really interesting. Simon Bray was saying he was the one person who voted against it. Very interesting. In fact, he was quite right. It should never have gone ahead. They should have done the planning permission before they had actually even done the thing. It's been a monstrous waste of money, what they've done so far. Or what we have learnt from this, it is probably the wrong site. And if it was built on a greenfield site, it would probably be 100 million less than it is currently being. So yes, we've got to go back and redo those sums and think of the site, whether it's Warwick Farm, Overdale, or whatever. But I suspect it will have to be on somewhere like Warwick Farm would probably be the cheapest. I don't know. But I think we should look at costs very carefully before we go down that line and review the services which are going to be taken. I know a lot of people in this room know a lot more about that than I do, and that's going to be a problem. But I think we've got to review it, and we've got to stop it going ahead and look at the site again. It's definitely not in the right site. That's what the planner thought, and I think we've got to go back. It was the wrong decision taken, and the states weren't given enough information when it was debated in 2016, and that was the ministerial system again. One person taking the decision, no debate. They were misinformed. They hadn't got all the information. Yes, we have to go back, look at the site, and get the proper figures again, and probably pull everybody in and talk to everybody again. But it's a hospital that should have been built yesterday, so we'll have to probably do it on a greenfield site where it will be more cost-effective to buy. So probably Warwick Farm sticks out as probably one of the best places. Thank you.
Right. Another question. We've got a radio mic, so it can come right to the front. Don't be shy. Somebody going to put their hand up? Or have you had enough? Are there no more? Another question over here. Oh, the lady there then, first. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Chris Scavvy. You've both alluded to training for young people who do not want to go to university. How would you propose to support the infrastructure in further education to improve chances?
Okay, thank you. And I think that was... Yes, it would be David.
Very, very good question. I think we've got to raise the level of education and tertiary education in this island. And in order to do that, I think I'd dearly like to see a campus where students come in, or they have accommodation to come in and compete. So they will be paying us, instead of we paying the UK or France or wherever to go, they come in, they pay us. When we can then have better professors. You know, we can start giving university status for Jersey. That's what we need. Or I would like to see the Channel Islands together think about this problem. We've got excellent opportunities here. We have the zoo that could do zoology, botany, biology. We've got the music, we could do that. We've got excellent brains in maths, excellent brains in economics, excellent brains in law. We could bring them together and we could sell it at a really golden time. We've already got an excellent business school. Platt's done a brilliant job with that. It works, it sells. And we're already doing that, and that's what we've got to do. I think if we can get a campus, I have said in my manifesto, wouldn't it be nice if we could politely ask the governor if he could move to La Garenne and we could use that beautiful house and turn that into a campus? That's really a long shot. But I think it might be a possibility, because some of the army people said, that's a funny idea. I think it might work. We could put the governor there. He's got Gorey Castle and Rafale Douay all behind for these things, and we could have a site we could bring in top-class students, compete on a global scale, because we've got top-class brains in this island. I think we could do real things to elevate it, and therefore bring in people from ground upwards. Thank you.
I mean, I'll widen the question further. We go through a stage, and I think having brought up 2 children as well, that we have this mentality that the children should only go to university. We've started to lose touch with the fact that there are skills out there that we need, which can be done in the island. And I'm talking about apprenticeship schemes that should be done. What's the matter with somebody becoming a plumber and an electrician? We have this mentality that the only way that children can get on is to get a degree. And I do find it very difficult when, at the present time, to try and get hold of an electrician, a plumber, and goodness knows anybody in the building industry is nigh impossible. And I think that we've got to encourage, people will adapt to certain things they want to do. If they're good with their hands, but they're not very good thinking or writing or whatever, why do we force them down this route? I find it very difficult to understand that. And I think that with Highlands and with other places, there should be a place where people can do apprenticeships, and we should encourage the building trade. We should encourage all the people that are employing staff to go down that route. The thing that scares me about a university here, what are we selling? And I know what David has just said, but usually it's the first time our children get off the island to go to university. They find out exactly what life's all about. They're in a different place, and they've got to look after themselves. If we keep them here, I'm not sure that that's the right route. So I would rather go for apprenticeships. I think we've got to encourage builders and companies to make sure that they employ staff for their benefit and they get the benefit, not to put a university here. I just do not think it's sustainable over the years, and I really do think that we should be looking at ways of helping those people. Thank you.
Sorry, Hugh, I can't, Steve Taylor again. I can't help just reading your manifesto. Immigration. It's a double-edged sword. We've heard a lot earlier this evening about the positive benefits of immigration and the need to bring in talent for particular jobs in the island. There's also the negative sides of it, which are the pressures it brings on to our resources, our social infrastructure, and to housing. You talk in your manifesto about needing a clear and robust policy around immigration. If you ruled the world, you get elected, become chief minister, what would you do?
Probably get rid of the other 48 politicians, and then I'd be all right. Immigration I find very difficult to understand, and I've got to say that for the simple reason I was invited over to Guernsey with regards to their new policy of 9 months, 3 months, and going back to what we used to do. There's 200 job vacancies at the present time in the hospitality industry because they can't get the people in. I don't understand why, if they're providing the facilities for them to stay, why they can't go on short-term contracts. What's the matter with a short-term contract for 9 months? They come in, they do the work that we require them for, especially in the hospitality, the tourism industry. Why are we frightened about letting them in? I know that we get this impression that, oh, some hide and they stay, but they don't. If they're given a 9-month contract, we're almost going back to, dare I say it, looking at John, that, you know, this was what was happening after the war, and it worked. So why are we shy not to do it now. And I find it difficult because having spoken to what Guernsey's doing, they've got upset. I mean, a lot of not the hoteliers, but the people have got upset, but I'm sure it would work here. Our population's 100,000. We ain't getting any bigger. And the biggest thing is that we've got to make sure that if we do have to increase our situation from finance, or we have to make sure that tourism's working, the cattle industry's working, or whatever, we've got to be able to provide the facilities for these people to come in and support our hotels. If you speak to the hoteliers, they're struggling. They're struggling on commis chefs, they're struggling on everything. We've got to help them. And if it means that they're only here for 9 months, fine. But let's do something to really get them going, and let's get the tourism industry going full pelt on this. I can't see, I'm sure there's other ways, but I can't see it at the moment, not on a short-term basis. So let's get moving on it straight away. Thank you.
Yes, I mean, we've been trying to introduce this short-term contract thing for some time, this whole lot of work permits. Yes, I think that's definitely the way to go, but I think it should be linked with an identity card, social security card with the photo on it, and maybe even one day, because I was helped one of the DNA fingerprinting guys, maybe want to link it to DNA, so we actually know that person is that person, because there are a lot of people running around with false identity cards. How many, we do not know. But I certainly would go for definitely short-term contracts. I would definitely go for one. I would distribute them a card so that we know they're gone. An electronic card. We've got digital jersey. That's what they can do. They could make sure that somebody comes in. We need a border control, so when they come in, go out. So we do know exactly who's here and when and what they're doing. It's physically possible. The English system is intrinsically leaky. You know, the British system, we inherited the British system, it's intrinsically leaky. We can tighten up in this island. We could easily have that card, and it could easily be electronic. It wouldn't be expensive, and it would help us. It would also bring in contracts, like we bring in farmers. We can actually go to different countries and say, look, we want you to come in for 9 months. We've got this, we've got parts. We could do it rather like doing agriculture. And that would be quite helpful. They come in and go, and they leave after 6 months. But we've got to ensure they leave, be it with a bonus or whatever it's we go. And I think that's how I would go about it. Anyway, thank you.
So, we've had 16 questions, and right, okay. Go on, Derek. No, we'll indulge you. No, carry on.
Thank you. Derek Dulhay. Can I ask the candidates what your key priority is over the next term, and for Trinity, and how we could measure that, so something that you're going to do that we can measure over the next period. And secondly, if I can, what do you see your role as in the States of Jersey?
Right. David, yours to go.
Well, I see my role as multidisciplinary, but basically I would be there and I would try and concentrate on the one thing I've always tried to do is population. I would try to know all of you. I haven't known all your names, but the first thing I'd do is make sure I knew who you were. I'd come around again, make sure I knew you were. I'd also then try and make sure what you do, how many, there's an awful lot of rented accommodation in Trinity. And I'd like to know, who owns them and etc. That's what I would try and do. But it would be concentrating on population and trying to understand where the developments are going to take place. Because, as I said, one of my manifesto things was keep Trinity green. And if we can keep it green, that would be better for our future. And at the same time, my sole purpose in the States would be to try and put in population policies in place. That's what I've been trying to do for 30 or 40 years, and I would carry down that line. Thank you.
Thank you, Derek. The one thing I want to do is to get this Rouet, Pico and everything sorted with regards to the shop, which the constable has started and there is applications in. There is no doubt that the speeding in Rouet, Pico and Rue de Trinity and Rue d'Ebenezer is getting worse, and we have to look at it. Now, I know there's a lot of people that don't like 30s, 40s, 20s, 10s. But it has to be looked at, and it is being looked at. And it's quite interesting because I did most of Trinity Road on Tuesday, and the number of people there were wanting to know about the school as well, because the school is a very busy place. I think we've got to make sure that we look after the children and look after those people. We've got quite a lot of children in Grand Clos, and it's important that we look at those. And if you take the local situation, that's what we have to do. The second thing is that we've got to encourage the youth club to get more and more people involved as well. We need to support everything that's going on in Trinity. And it's important, and I'm very close to my heart making sure that Trinity comes first with what it wants to do, and I think that we have to support it. Going into what I'd like to do in the States, the closest department I've got to, and everybody knows this, of course, is Home Affairs. Dealing with fire, police and ambulance, customs and everything else, because I happen to sit on the emergency board with the vast majority of these people. So I know the civil servants. I also know I did know the ministers that were involved as well. I'm very interested in making sure that this island, one big word, it's safe to come here, it's safe to live in, and it's the one thing that we must encourage. And that particular committee does really make it safe. Very little is spoken about it, and I'm privileged to sit on it. But my God, we are being very, very well looked after, and it's one of the things that I would be very, very much interested in. Thank you.
Right. Okay, well, ladies and gentlemen, I think we've had an hour and a half. I think we've had some interesting questions and some interesting answers, and hopefully it's been informative for you this evening. So I really would like to, on behalf of the candidates, thank all of you for attending, and on behalf of you lot, to thank the candidates for their efforts this evening, which has been, I'm sure, much appreciated by everybody. Thank you.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you. Can I, just before you go, Clive, I know, sorry, if I'm allowed to do this, it is a sort of sales technique. It's nothing to do with me. John Lafond has wanted to go around and meet as many people as possible on Saturday morning. Now, John is in one of the front runners to become one of the senators. And what we'd like to do is to go around Maison Cabot and Grand Clos on Saturday morning. And if you are around or you wanted to have a chat with him, he's delighted to have a chat. He'd like to know from the older generation to the younger generation. And I think you know John Lafond. He spoke last night, and we'd be very much delighted to see as many people as possible on Saturday morning. But I leave that with you. Thank you. And thank you very much for turning up.
Right. So to just